In the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis called it the deep magic. If Probably the most famous of all seven of those fabulous stories is the first one, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And in that story, which is, I'm not sure it's quite an allegory, but it is at least a parable of redemption. Aslan, the lion, the great king, is strapped and tied to an ancient table and killed by the White Witch. And the children are devastated by this. Lucy and Susan have hidden in the darkness watching the macabre, horrible ceremony that the White Witch has performed. She thinks she has won. But when morning breaks, the stone table has broken in half, and Aslan miraculously comes to light. The deep magic has brought him back from the dead. And of course, that's a retelling of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. When that happened, the deep magic made it so that we could be sure that all the sin of all people from all time, from all the world, had been paid for. And that's what John in 1 John chapter 1, we're looking at verse 2, where he says, he is the atoning sacrifice for our sins, and not only for ours, but also for the sins of the whole world. Now, that's the foundation, that our sins have been paid for. Redemption, atonement has been made, and redemption has been secured. And then he goes on in verse 3 to say, we know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands. And this is where we left off last time. Now, there are some who believe that the whole point is obey his commands. All your effort, all your energy, all your personal resources have to go toward obeying his commands. And there are even people who draw from this that if you don't obey his command, then you pull yourself out of an intimate, saved relationship with him. Now, I kind of basically grew up with that mentality that one sin could keep you out. I don't believe that anymore. And I don't think that's what John was saying, because John, just in the verse before, talked about how atonement had been purchased for the whole world, not just us, but us and the whole rest of the world. And I take that to be all of humankind for all time. We know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands. Here's what I get from that. When I keep his commands, this is a signal. This is evidence of my intimacy, my connection, my knowing him. I wish I could remember who the quote was credited to, and I don't right now, but I remember the substance of the quote is, how could he be my best friend and I not want to do what he asks? This is where I find myself more and more and more. Less and less it is about me obeying so that God will give me the nod. That's how I grew up, but it's not how I want to progress from here. From here, and I believe this is what John is saying, I obey because I have this relationship with God. And my obedience reflects that relationship. I have confidence in that I know him because my behavior, my obedience, it illustrates it. It expresses it. So my obedience is not a means of gaining approval with God. It is an expression of the fact that I have his approval. Well, you can split hairs and you can think however you want to about that. In verse 4, he goes on, whoever says, I know him, but does not do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. All right, John is a master of contrasts and if-then phrases, right? We've seen a bunch of ifs. Now, whoever says, I know him. Well, what is meant by that is, yes, I'm tight with God. I know Jesus. But does not do what he commands is a liar. It's like this. Hey, you know what? If you tell me you know and love Jesus, but you're not doing what he told you to do, there's a disconnect there. And John doesn't just say, oh, well, that's a disconnect you need to address. I mean, he is blunt and to the point. You are a liar. You're lying to yourself and you're lying to the world. But know this, can't lie to God. So I think sometimes when when we talk about and think about and study the concept of grace, obedience goes away. And that it is totally about a credit card with no limit that I never have to make payments on. That's grace. My ticket is punched. I'm good to go. Now I can just do what I want. That's not New Testament grace. This is what Dietrich Bonhoeffer gave a great title to, cheap grace. Real grace says, because God has redeemed my soul, he has bought me back out of a life of darkness and futility into a life I can live in the light. Remember, that was in 1 Peter, if you were with us when we were going through 1 Peter. And because of that, I now have energy, motivation. I have what is required to express that relationship through obedience. The concept I want to just drive home again and again and again is grace makes it possible for us to obey because of God's love for us, not in order to get his love for us. And if we get those two things messed up and turned around, life gets really ugly. For me, where it took me was a constant state of insecurity about this one question. Have I obeyed enough? Am I good enough? Is that enough? Does God like me now? Well, see, grace answers all those questions by saying it's not about how much you obey to get God's approval. It's about God has approved you because of Jesus and his sacrifice, not because of your works or deeds. And out of that, you obey. But if you say that you know him and you don't obey him, you're a liar. And it's not just like, well, you bent the truth. Nope, you're a liar and the truth is not in you. Okay, that's... He took the gloves off and he went right to the point. In verse 5, he goes on, but if anyone obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in them. In other words, the implication is when you really are in this relationship with Christ, when you really have said yes to him on his terms, then you express the love of God through your obedience. Okay. If anyone obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in him. And this idea of being made complete, other places in the Bible, this idea is referred to as perfect. I don't know anybody who can obey perfectly, but I do know that as I obey, I bring God's love to completion. I move it forward toward this perfection in my own heart and in my own life, and as an expression of his nature in the world where I live. Then he goes on. This is how we know we are in him. All right, this is a big, big thing, okay? You want to know? I want to know. I don't want to guess about it. I don't want to conjecture. I want to know I am in him. My relationship with him is secure, okay? Well, this is how you can know that. Verse 6, whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did. Holy cow. Well, let's think about what that means. Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is Jesus was perfect. Never made a mistake, never sinned, never discerned inaccurately, full of love, full of grace and truth. Oh my goodness. I can't measure that. I can't live up to that on my own. I don't think John is saying be perfect in every way, the way Jesus was perfect in every way. I think what was Jesus' prime motivation as he lived? Was it to look good? Was it to be perfect? I don't think that was his primary motivation. I think his primary motivation was to express the nature of his Father, to do the will of his Father, and to draw people to that. For me, that's the best I can do. Because I find myself in my best moment, on my best day, I mess up. And that's, my best day, it doesn't happen very often. Most of my days are not my best day. You? If most of your days are your best day, man, I envy you. What vitamins are you taking? I want to get my hands on those. On my worst day, hear me, on my worst day, God is no less in love with me than on my best day. I imperfectly reflect the motivation of Jesus in my life. As I grow more mature, something in a process over time happens. It is that I learn to do this more consistently. I choose more consistently to reflect the nature and motivation of Jesus. I don't expect myself to ever become perfect in the sense that Jesus was perfect. I don't ever expect to be the Son of God in the same way Jesus was, but God has done this miraculous thing for me. He has made me his son. He has adopted me as his son. And now my agenda, if I choose to, can be built around reflecting his nature. We're going to come back to that next time, because this is not a small thing. And if we leave it up in the theological clouds, we squander an opportunity to think deeply about life on the runway. So I want to bring it down to the runway next time when we get together on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.